This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Jill Newbron. Here are tonight's top stories. Taiwan's president calls on the opposition-controlled parliament to pass a special military budget or risk rupturing the island's defences against China. Australia charges 2 Chinese nationals with foreign interference, accusing them of spying on a Buddhist group for China. Beijing denies the accusations while urging the safeguarding of rights and interests of its citizens. The US reportedly moves to counter China in Bangladesh, ahead of polls that could see Dhaka draw closer to Beijing. China's consumer inflation cools in January, while producer price deflation persists, highlighting the underlying weakness in domestic demand. Now, 10 people dead in Canadian gun violence, including the suspect, after one of the nation's worst mass shootings in years had also left more than 25 others injured. Also tonight, China and India looking to reset ties in their latest exchanges between senior diplomats. Beijing promoting a vision of partnership, while New Delhi has its focus on practical and incremental steps after years of strain. And
I'm Chandni Vatwani in South Sulawesi, and I'll tell you how authorities are helping seaweed farmers swap out their plastic buoys for eco-friendly ones like these.
Taiwan's President William Lai has urged opposition lawmakers to approve a stalled $40 billion special defense budget. He warns that delays could weaken the island's security and its standing with allies. The proposal would raise defense spending to 3.3% of GDP, bolstering the island's military amid mounting pressure from China. Opposition parties, which control parliament, have blocked the measure, saying they will not sign what they call a blank check. Instead, they are pushing for a significantly smaller defense spending package. Lai warned of serious consequences if the budget is not passed.
预算迟未通过，除了可能让台湾跌出优先名单，延宕关键武器装备的交付，更会让国际社会质疑台湾守护自己国家的决心。
U.S. arms sales to Taipei remain a major source of tension between Beijing and Washington. Shortly after Lai's remarks, Taiwan reported renewed Chinese military activity around the island, including long-range training flights in the Pacific. Beijing, which claims Taiwan as its territory, has warned the U.S. against interfering in its internal affairs. China in December reacted angrily to the U.S. announcement of its largest ever arms package for Taiwan, worth more than $11 billion. The U.S. has backed President Lai's proposed defense spending plan. China says it does not interfere in other countries after Australia charged 2 Chinese nationals for spying on Beijing's behalf. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has urged Canberra to exercise care in its handling of the case.
我不掌握有关案件的具体情况。中国从不干涉别国的内政，同时坚决反对以外国干涉为借口干扰中国同有关国家正常的人员往来和交流合作。中方敦促澳方慎重、妥善处理有关案件，保障中国公民合法权益。
Australian police have charged the 2 Chinese nationals with foreign interference, accusing them of covertly gathering information on a Buddhist group in Canberra. Roger Maynard with this report for CNA.
These latest arrests are part of a continuing crackdown by Australian authorities aimed at guarding against the infiltration of organisations by other nations. The so-called foreign interference laws, which were introduced in 2018, target overseas players who try to exert influence on organisations and individuals in this country to divulge information on their activities. Today's charges were laid against a woman aged 31 and a 25-year-old man who were each accused with one count of reckless foreign interference. If found guilty, they face a maximum penalty of 15 years imprisonment. It's alleged the pair worked under the direction of a public security bureau in China to secretly gather information about the Canberra branch of a Buddhist association in the Australian capital. They are further alleged to have worked alongside another woman who was arrested under the same law in August last year. 2 other people were charged under foreign interference legislation in 2020 and 2023, though it's understood they are not connected with these latest arrests. While the exact nature and the scale of these alleged offences has yet to be revealed, previous cases are understood to have involved Chinese-based financial institutions who paid money to individuals here as part of an operation to covertly gather details about this Buddhist association, which is banned in China. Now, while the full details of the investigation by the Australian authorities have yet to emerge, it's clear that Canberra is increasingly worried about the extent to which foreign players are prepared to go and the threat they pose to Australia in general. Stephen Nutt, the Assistant Commissioner of Counter-Terrorism and Special Investigations at the Australian Federal Police, said foreign interference was a serious crime that undermined democracy and social cohesion. While Mike Burgess, the Director General of ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, said foreign interference remained one of the country's principal security concerns. Multiple foreign regimes are monitoring, harassing and intimidating members of our diaspora communities, he claimed, and this sort of behaviour was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. Well, with a total of 5 people now charged over the past 5 years under the foreign interference laws, the challenge facing Canberra is how to address the problem in a meaningful way which might act as a deterrent to others in the future. The government here is all too well aware that upsetting the Chinese can have serious economic and diplomatic consequences. But, as Security Chief Mike Burgess warned, a complex, challenging and changing security environment is becoming more dynamic, diverse and degraded. Roger Maynard, CNA, Sydney.
Turning to Bangladesh, residents there will be heading to the ballot boxes tomorrow to pick a new government in the nation's first election since youth-led protests toppled Sheikh Hasina's government in 2024. Analysts say the results will likely further boost China's influence in the country after the ousted leader, who is aligned with New Delhi, fled to India, souring ties. Beijing has stepped up its investment and diplomatic outreach, most recently signing a defense deal to build a drone factory near Bangladesh's border with India. Washington is reportedly concerned and has moved to counter Beijing's growing clout. Reuters news agency, citing an interview with the U.S. ambassador to Dhaka, says America is planning to offer Bangladesh's next government its defense systems as alternatives to Chinese military hardware. Our CNA's senior correspondent, Afifa Arifin, is joining us live from Dhaka now. Afifa, first, tell us why there is a battle of influence over the country.
Well, Jill, that's because Bangladesh sits at the crossroads that every major power cares about. It sits in the heart of the Bay of Bengal between India and Southeast Asia, with access to some of the busiest shipping lines in the world. Economically, it's a fast-growing market with 175 million people. It's a major manufacturing hub. It's also a key player in global supply chains. So really, influence here translates to access to trade routes, to energy projects, defense ties, as well as long-term competitive advantage. So for decades, India has always enjoyed this sort of closer friendship with Bangladesh, particularly under the Sheikh Hasina government. But analysts have told me that all of that changed following the mass nationwide unrest in 2024, which overthrew the Sheikh Hasina government. And as you said, she has since fled to India. Now, over the last decade, we have also seen how China's investments here in Bangladesh have been growing. But also analysts are saying that since the unrest, the China's influence here in Bangladesh has steadily been increasing, while India's influence has sort of been weakened following Sheikh Hasina's government being overthrown. If we look at the United States as well, we know that the U.S., it's fostering closer ties with Bangladesh. Just a couple of days ago, struck that tariff deal, bringing it down to 19% for Bangladesh. It does see Bangladesh as a crucial player in its wider Indo-Pacific strategy, and it doesn't want, or it wants to prevent any single power from dominating here in South Asia.
So how will tomorrow's polls likely shape China's influence over Bangladesh then?
Well, the political reality is that the Awami League under Sheikh Hasina is not able to contest in this election. It's been banned. And so the two main contenders are the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, as well as a coalition that's led by Islamist party Jamaat-e-Islami. And both of these parties are seen to be less India-leaning. And so that changes the balance here quite a bit. China has been very careful in what it says about Bangladesh's election publicly. Beijing is sticking to its line of non-interference. But we also know that Chinese officials have been engaging with political parties here in Bangladesh across the spectrum. So they are willing to really work with anyone here. Beijing, of course, sees Bangladesh as one of its important economic partners. It's a key partner in its Belt and Road Initiative as well. It has dozens of companies here that are involved in major infrastructure projects, in energy projects, in drone projects, is something you mentioned before. We're looking at ports, highways, bridges, power plants as well. And so local analysts say that the main concern that China has here in Bangladesh post-election is this idea of continuity, of stability. So whoever wins, whoever forms government, China wants that sort of practical relationship to continue, that existing contracts continue, that projects continue on schedule, and that the overall investment climate here remains friendly for them.
All right, many thanks for that, CNA's senior correspondent Aviva Arifin in Dhaka. Coming up on East Asia tonight, China's consumption slump bringing down a premium restaurant chain in the mainland. And TikTok owner ByteDance reportedly developing its own AI chip. Welcome back as we kick off the business update with Roland Lim, starting with those inflation numbers from China, Roland.
Thanks, Jill. Yes, China making small dents in its battle against deflation. Factory deflation eased more than expected last month as high commodity costs lifted downward pressure on prices. Producer prices fell 1.4% on year in January. That's the smallest decline since July of 2024. While the consumer price index rose just 0.2%, a much narrower increase compared to December's figures. Authorities are pinning hopes on the upcoming Chinese New Year holiday to revive sluggish spending. The 9-day break, the longest on record, is being touted as a chance to boost activity. Local governments have set aside $297 million to directly benefit consumers, alongside subsidies and traditional cash rate red envelopes. The mixed picture in China's first inflation report of the year, weighing on market sentiment, with major indices moving in a tight range. The Shanghai Composite managed to stay above water, 4,131 points. Shenzhen, however, 0.35 in the red. Hang Seng Index advancing 0.3. Shanghai XNG Holdings, owner of the premium Shanghai Min dining chain, has abruptly closed all of its 10 outlets on the mainland, the latest casualty of China's consumption slump. The restaurants were once a popular choice for banquets and business gatherings, but have been struggling with losses since 2018. Revenue fell 44% in the first half of last year, with losses of $2.55 million. China's catering sector was hit hard last year by extreme price wars in the delivery market, with 14-cent coffees and 50-cent chicken rice meals. That has battered food establishments, eroding margins and fueling unsustainable competition. More market action. Let's have a quick check on East Asian markets. In Seoul, the Kospi Index rising for a third consecutive session, led by gains in automakers. on easing worries about U.S. tariffs and optimism around robot technologies. A 2% rise in TSMC shares, pushing Taipei's benchmark to its strongest level on record. The Japanese markets closed for a public holiday. A TikTok parent company, ByteDance, is said to be developing an AI chip and is in talks with Samsung Electronics to manufacture it. A Reuters report based on two sources say the Chinese tech giant aims to receive sample chips by the end of next month and plans to produce 100,000 units this year. Negotiations with Samsung includes access to memory chip supplies that are in short supply amid the global AI infrastructure build-out. ByteDance reportedly plans to spend over $22 billion on AI-related purchases this year, and more than half of that spent on buying NVIDIA's chips, including the H200, and advancing its own in-house chip. Global tech giants, including Amazon and Microsoft, have been developing their own AI chips to reduce reliance on NVIDIA. U.S. export controls to China have also added urgency for Chinese tech companies to develop their own chips. China's biggest contract chip maker, SMIC, warns that profits could come under pressure this year as costs rise after a major expansion to meet strong chip demand. Its co-CEO says the industry is in crisis mode as electronics makers frantically try to secure memory chip supplies. Zhou Haiqun says that mid-range and lower-end mobile phone makers are notably squeezed by the supply crunch and expects new memory chip capacity to be operational later this year. But he says he is optimistic that SMIC can continue to grow with orders related to AI memory chip to the mid and high-end applications as well. SMIC has urged electronics makers not to be too pessimistic about the chip crunch and not to cut orders. The chip maker is expanding capacity further, saying last year's earnings were lifted by a shift from overseas to domestic production, a trend that it expects to continue. The firm reported a 60.7% jump in fourth quarter profit yesterday, beating market estimates. Revenue also topped estimates, but shares under pressure in both Shanghai and Hong Kong on that cautious outlook. And you've been hearing us talk about semiconductors, chips, and memory storage. But are they the same thing? Well, not exactly, although they are closely related. Now, a semiconductor is a material, usually silicon, which can conduct electricity only under certain conditions. This allows it to act like a switch, making it a key element in modern electronics. A chip is a finished product made from semiconductor material. It contains millions or even billions of tiny electronic switches. Now, a chip can do different jobs. An AI chip, like the one ByteDance is developing, processes information. Whereas a memory chip, the kind that's in short supply right now, is specifically designed to store data. The shortage of memory chips affects everything from AI servers to smartphones and cars. Now, could the storage of memory chips affect your next smartphone or EV purchase? Well, to tell us more, Neil Shah, who is President of Research and co-founder at Counterpoint Research, joins us live from Mumbai. Neil, good to have you on the show. Now, ByteDance, as I was just reporting, developing its own AI chip amid a global memory crunch. What's your view on this? I mean, this chip race, is that going to hit the supply and price of everyday tech?
So yeah, there are a couple of things. If you look at ByteDance and other AI hyperscalers, they're trying to build their own chip just to have some independence from existing chip suppliers and also to diversify their overall data centers into a heterogeneous environment. Because there are some workloads which will require their more efficient in-house design chips. And that is where they're going for this ASIC AI data center chips and designing in-house. And obviously it is then manufactured by the same foundries like Samsung or TSMC. So there is definitely a demand for more ASIC chips. Our research says the number of ASIC chips which will be shipping in next couple of years will be more than the GPU chips by 2028.
At the same time, we are seeing big tech firms stockpile memory chips for AI training. Is that squeezing supply for consumer devices? And will regular users end up footing the bill eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the biggest crunch right now. We are in this AI race where all these AI hyperscalers are rushing to build gigawatt data centers, and they have procured billions of dollars of compute, which is from NVIDIA or designing their own chips, or AMD or Intel. However, you have all the processor chips, but what has happened is because of the number of parameters in the particular data model or AI model is increasing, we are reaching like tens of billions of parameters. And to process and train those kind of data, there is a memory wall which has been hit. And you need more memory. You need more high bandwidth memory. You need more LPDDR memory, which is called DRAM. And because of that, all of these different AI hyperscalers are procuring a lot of memory chips. And there are only three big suppliers in the world: Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. And they are allocating all the capacity to this high profitable segment of memory. And that is why the all lower end or lower end of the market, which is consumer devices or set-top box or smartphones or PCs, they are hurting more because they are not getting the supply. And if they are getting the supply, they have to pay almost 3x or 4x the price from a year ago. So that is being eventually passed on to consumers, and we'll see consumers buying more expensive smartphones or PCs going forward.
The flip side to this, of course, is that with US export controls and rising tech tensions, how much of this AI push is about innovation versus, say, geopolitical survival?
That's a great question. So if you look at since the COVID pandemic and the supply crunch, which we have seen in semiconductors, most of the economies want to be self-sufficient, have the manufacturing design as well as manufacturing in their own wheelhouse. So we are seeing TSMC expanding into US, Intel benefiting from the CHIPS Act. So there is a lot of geopolitical push, but at the same time, with the AI boom, the innovation is also ramping up rapidly across processing, the chips, GPUs, CPUs, and also the AI ASIC accelerators, which you're talking about, but also in terms of the memory. This high bandwidth memory is a completely new form of innovation, which allows training those big models and also then in future for inferencing as well. So there's a mix of both right now. And now we are seeing two parallel ecosystems developing. One is China and one is the non-China. And since China has so many US sanctions, so they're trying to be more self-sufficient. And that is what we're talking about in terms of SMIC trying to increase and invest in the capex for building more advanced chips, because they don't have access to the latest and greatest equipment even to build a 2 nanometer or 3 nanometer chip at this point.
Neil, we've also reported and talked a lot about the overbooking and stockpiling in chips. Do you see us heading to another boom-bust cycle when it comes to chips?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing right now, it is in memory at this point. For compute processor, it's still okay. But for memory, it is happening because the chip supply is limited and it's not going to change for at least by end of 2027. The situation is not going to alleviate. So a lot of these AI hyperscalers, in this AI race, they wouldn't want to remain behind. And then that's why stockpiling as much as chips they can at this point. And even the bigger players such as Apple, Samsung, they are also securing supply, so they don't get affected. The biggest brunt would be faced by the players which don't have enough scale, which are low cost players, and the margins are very tight. For them, it's going to be a very difficult situation for next 1.5 years.
Neil, thank you for those insights. That was Neil Shah, Vice President of Research and co-founder at Counterpoint Research.
Yeah.
And that'll do it for business. Jill.
Interesting interview. Thanks, Roland. Now stay with us, because coming up on East Asia Tonight, Beijing calls on New Delhi to uphold their partnership and manage differences as both sides seek a reset in ties. And another conviction in Hong Kong under the national security law, days after Jimmy Lai was sentenced to 20 years in jail. You're with East Asia Tonight, and these are the headlines we're following. Taiwan's President William Lai calls on the opposition-controlled parliament to pass a special military budget or risk rupturing the island's defences against China. Beijing says it does not interfere in other countries after Australia charges 2 Chinese nationals, accusing them of spying for China. And the US reportedly moves to counter China's growing influence in Bangladesh ahead of tomorrow's polls that analysts say could see Dhaka draw even closer to Beijing. Bangladesh is at a pivotal democratic moment. Voters are set to decide not just who forms the next government, but the future direction of the nation's governance. One man who's played a central role in drafting the proposed constitutional reforms that are being put to a referendum is Professor Ali Riaz. CNA's senior correspondent Afifa Arifin spoke to him in Dhaka on both the election and the referendum scheduled for tomorrow.
The referendum is asking people in a very simple question whether they would like to see changes in the system of governance as well as constitutional measures. It has been broken down in the ballot into 4 different areas. Some of them are institutional measures, some of them are issues regarding the bicameral parliament.
If the referendum passes, there is a plan to set up a constitutional reform council and to complete the reforms within a 180-day deadline. Realistically, though, can this be achieved? All these sweeping reforms in a matter of 6 months, and what happens if they fail to meet this deadline?
First of all, is it possible to do it? Yes, it can. In this instance, the July National Charter, which is a result of a conversation among the political parties and with the political parties for 9 months. And it came out of a commission, 6 commissions, then a National Consensus Commission. So the basic draft is there. What are the issues? What 180 days would be doing is basically putting them, articulating them in the legalistic language, constitutional language. What would happen if it doesn't require? We don't consider it as to implement any punitive measures, because that would create more confusion, that would create an instability.
Is there anything that legally binds these political parties, whoever wins in the election, to enforce these reforms?
There is a document which actually makes them legally binding. Because on 17th of October last year, all political parties signed a document where they have made a pledge, which was a part of the National Charter. Politically speaking, if it passes through, which I hope would, if it passes through, if the majority of Bangladesh says that we would like to see that, which political party would actually say, no, I don't care about the people? They would, despite the fact they would also be winning through the same election, same process.
What happens if the public votes no and they reject the referendum? What happens to these reforms?
I expect that that's not going to happen, but evidently if it is a no, that means the current constitution remains, current system remains. And it would be at the disposal of the majority party.
The July uprising in 2024 was fundamentally about preventing sort of a one-person rule in this country. From the reforms on the table, what sort of specific changes can we see that can most effectively prevent another form of that one-person concentration of power?
One of the major issues was the concentration of power and non-accountability. Hence, political parties have agreed that there will be a term limit for the Prime Minister. A person in his or her lifetime can only be Prime Minister for 10 years. The second thing that we have proposed and the parties have agreed to, having the parliamentary committees would be headed by the opposition. So all these things would actually restrain the power of the Prime Minister. But let me reiterate one more thing. This is not intended to limit the power of the Prime Minister as Prime Minister. Rather, it is to make that person more accountable and also to prevent any kind of concentration on single hand.
What are your minimum benchmarks for calling this election a credible one? Is it turnout? Is it absence of violence? Or is it an acceptance of the results from the major parties?
The third one is the most important to me, acceptance of the political parties. I hope the Bangladeshis and the political parties would break the cycle of that if I don't win, the election is not fair. That cycle needs to be broken, and I hope they will do it. That's one of the critical elements, but that's a political culture part. With respect to the success or the benchmark, I would say how the people are reacting to it. It's not only the number, but also look at how they are participating in it.
The Chinese President Xi Jinping has called the past year, quote, unusual and extraordinary in relation to the anti-graft investigations which led to the expulsion of the country's two top generals. In a rare public reference to the probes, Mr. Xi added that the military has grown stronger and addressed various risks and challenges in the fight against corruption. China's two highest-ranked generals had been involved in disciplinary probes, with He Weidong expelled in October last year and Zhang Youxia placed under investigations in January. The removals mark some of the most high-profile purges of the country's military in decades. A Hong Kong court has convicted the father of a wanted political exile for a national security violation in the first case of its kind. 69-year-old Kwok Ying-sang was found guilty of attempting to deal with the financial assets of his US-based daughter, Anna Kwok. She is the executive director of Washington-based Hong Kong Democracy Council. Hong Kong police have issued a bounty of about $128,000 for her arrest and banned anyone from handling any funds on her behalf. Kwok's sentencing is due later this month. Anna Kwok's brother was also arrested for the same crime, but is out on bail. Today's conviction is the latest linked to Hong Kong's strict national security framework, which days ago saw media tycoon Jimmy Lai sentenced to 20 years in prison. Lai's case has attracted much international attention, with the White House indicating that US President Donald Trump could raise the matter with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping during their meeting.
Something I've heard the president advocate for both publicly and privately. I had the honor of being in that meeting with President Trump and President Xi in South Korea that took place, and this was brought up by the president himself. It is important to him, and he looks forward to visiting China in April.
Senior Chinese and Indian diplomats have met in New Delhi seeking to boost ties after years of strain. India's Foreign Minister Vikram Misri hosted China's Vice Foreign Minister Ma Xiaoxu as part of gatherings for the BRICS bloc. Beijing says the talks were friendly and candid and called for greater partnership, while New Delhi says the discussions focused on practical and gradual steps to rebuild ties. The talks covered areas such as maintaining border peace, the need for an updated air services agreement, visa facilitation measures, and more people-to-people exchanges. Both sides also affirming more multilateral cooperation, as well as to support each other's BRICS leadership roles. India is the current chair of the bloc. Coming up in East Asia tonight, at least 10 people dead in Canada, including the suspect, after one of the nation's worst mass shootings in years. Plus, more than a dozen Buddhist monks arrive in Washington, D.C. as they reach the end of their 4-month walk for peace across the U.S. At least 10 people have been killed, including the suspect, following a mass shooting in a remote part of Canada's British Columbia province. More than 25 others were injured, 2 in a life-threatening condition. The attack marks one of the country's deadliest mass casualty events in recent years. 6 victims were found dead inside the high school in the town of Tumbler Ridge, about a 14-hour drive from Vancouver. Another person died on the way to the hospital. 2 others were discovered at a nearby home. The suspect was also found dead in what officials say appears to have been from a self-inflicted injury. Police say there is no ongoing threat to the public and there are no additional suspects. Local schools are set to close for the rest of the week. Authorities are working to determine how the victims were connected to the shooter. British Columbia Premier David Eby and Public Safety Minister Nina Krieger have expressed their condolences to the victims' families. Mr. Eby is set to visit the town as soon as possible to provide support.
This is a devastating and unimaginable tragedy. We can't imagine what the community is going through, but I know it's causing us all to hug our kids a little bit tighter tonight.
This is only the beginning for so many who have families who have been impacted by today's tragic events. The shockwaves of this horrific event will continue to reverberate through the community and throughout the country for some time.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has expressed condolences to the victims' families, describing the attack as, quote, a horrific act of violence. He has suspended his planned trip to the Munich Security Conference, where he was scheduled to attend from today through Sunday. World leaders have also expressed their condolences. A grueling journey across the U.S. comes to an end. 19 Buddhist monks have completed a 4-month pilgrimage for peace, walking thousands of kilometers through the country. Their final steps into the nation's capital were met by huge crowds, transforming the arrival into a powerful procession for peace. Tony Waterman filed this report for CNA from Washington, D.C.
Monks marching for peace. Draped in saffron and maroon robes and carrying little more than bags on their shoulders, they were greeted like rock stars upon their arrival in Washington, D.C. The final leg in their 3,700-kilometer-long journey from Fort Worth, Texas. Dawn Torres flew in from the other side of the country, Washington State, to be here with her friend Sue. After weeks of following the monks' journey on social media, they were intent on being here in person.
Just so hungry, like I think everybody else is, to have peace when we're seeing so much hate and so much anger.
And I said to Dawn when I invited her, I said, let's go be part of history. And I think that's what this is.
Yeah.
They were just 2 of the thousands that gathered outside Washington National Cathedral to catch a glimpse of the monks and to hear their simple message: block out the noise to let in mindfulness, kindness, and peace.
Peace is something that we are seeking for so many years, and yet we still not find it. You have locked it and put them in the box. We are not walking from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C. to bring you any peace, but to raise the awareness of peace so that you can unlock that box and free it.
It's a message resonating with weary Americans who feel the nation is more divided than ever before.
Basically, it's the authenticity that people are looking for, and they want to see unity. They also want to find not only peace in society, but peace within themselves.
The type of war right now that's very dangerous because, they worse than all that chemical or that bombing or hand grenade, because it slowly destroys our mental and the feeling, because they eat up our thinking and energy and disappointed. We need a hope. So this is the hope for our future.
The trek hasn't been easy. The monks have faced frigid temperatures and unusually heavy snow. And one of their members eventually had to have his leg amputated after a car crashed into their caravan. But step by step, they've brought hope and a message of calm perseverance with their trusty 4-legged companion Aloka by their side.
Today marks the 108th day of the monks' journey. That number, 108, very symbolic in Buddhism. It represents the earthly desires and passions and delusions that prohibit people from reaching nirvana. Very intentional that the monks arrived here in the nation's capital with their message of peace on day 108. For CNA, I'm Tony Waterman in Washington, D.C.
Indonesia is one of the world's largest producers of seaweed, with more than 80% of its harvest going to China, its top market for the past decade. But cultivation involves single-use plastic bottles, a major ocean pollutant. In the third and final part of the series on Indonesia's green gold, CNA's Chatni Vatvani examines a government pilot project to reduce waste and promote more sustainable farming practices.
This is a typical morning for Ruslan. If he's not harvesting seaweed, he's cultivating them using the longline method. Seaweed fragments function as seedlings and are attached to the main ropes, then suspended from buoys anchored in the water. This creates a vertical farm that maximizes space and uses the entire water column for growth. In major seaweed-producing regions, the industry relies heavily on single-use plastic bottles like these for buoyancy to hold up cultivation lines. But things are slowly changing in Indonesia, starting here in South Sulawesi. I'm surrounded by plastic bottles that seaweed farmers use as buoys to keep their seed lines at optimal depths. But these ones are more durable, can be used in several harvest cycles, and can still be recycled when no longer in function. This is part of a pilot project by the government. And Ruslan is among the first batch of seaweed farmers to receive buoys made of high-density polyethylene, a type of thermoplastic known for its high strength-to-density ratio, resistance to chemicals, and most importantly, is recyclable.
Paling bagus lah istilahnya. Kenapa? Terutama ketahanannya bisa. Sedangkan pelampung biasa itu bisa 2 kali panen, 1 kali panen, hancur lagi. Sedangkan itu bisa tahunan kalanya. Kedua, tidak terputar di bentangan. Kalau di laut, karena ombak terputar. Tidak dia ini, bagusnya tidak terputar. Jadi istilahnya lebih menguntungkan lah ini, sayang sedikit.
Authorities are looking to strengthen downstreaming in the seaweed industry and support the welfare of coastal communities. The new buoys are part of a campaign to cultivate environmentally friendly seaweed for a more sustainable future.
Setelah itu masa waktunya akan habis, maka kita bisa ganti lagi. Dia bisa mengganti, di-recycle lagi. Sebetulnya ini bukan hanya sekedar mengganti, tapi yang paling penting itu adalah transformasi knowledge kepada mereka bahwa plastik itu adalah pencemar di laut yang mereka harus kurangi.
For now, the initial distribution phase involves just one area in the province. But environmentalists say more needs to be done to improve the cultivation process, given that the industry is still in its early stages and seaweed can be considered a relatively new commodity.
Penting juga misalnya mengajak masyarakat atau petani itu untuk berdiskusi kira-kira jalan keluar atau alternatif lain penggunaan botol plastik itu apa baiknya. Karena saya meyakini beberapa daerah atau petani-petani di Sulsel ini, rumput laut itu pasti memiliki atau punya alternatif tersendiri. Mungkin saja misalnya dengan menggunakan sandal bekas atau kelapa.
Optimal seaweed production requires a healthy supply of good seeds, and authorities say they're also exploring options in creating seaweed nurseries to ensure the harvests can fetch the best possible prices. While funding remains a challenge, these efforts are a step towards more sustainable seaweed cultivation and could strengthen the future of Indonesia's green gold industry. Chandni Vatvani, CNA, South Sulawesi, Indonesia.
Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's snap election gambit has paid off in a big way, handing her ruling Liberal Democratic Party a supermajority in the powerful lower house. The landslide win allows Ms. Takaichi to enact her economic and security reforms, even empowering her to amend the constitution. But how quickly and aggressively will she move, and what does it mean for Japan and its neighbours? Well, our latest CNA correspondent podcast explores these issues and more. Here's an excerpt.
There's an inclination, as seen in Ms. Takaichi, to be
a little bit more assertive, maybe a little less polite, but certainly not rude.
Well, Arnold, it's clear that her message did come across, and the fact that she's a woman was positive for the Japanese public. And also, she's very clear in what she's been saying. Not, speaking in a very absurd way or unclear way like her predecessors. So that made a difference. And it's not really because of her nationalistic views that the public seems to be in support of her. What political watchers think, based on what I've been hearing and speaking to them, is Ms. Takaichi's LDP's landslide victory was due to her popularity. Period. Her popularity. Her cabinet's popularity rate has stayed around 60%, 60%. That's high. And compare that to her predecessor, Shigeru Ishiba, which was around 30%. Now, the age group that gave the strongest support to Ms. Takaichi were those between 18 to 29. 18 is the lowest eligible voting age in Japan. Now, major daily Sankei Shimbun suggested close to 90% of people in that age range in January supported her. And it's not really about nationalism, but more about populism. But if you speak to the older generation, then they would react differently. They would say, oh, Ms. Takaichi does share their view of a conservative stance.
So she's kind of made herself a prime minister for all of Japan, in a manner of speaking.
If you want to hear more from Arnold and Michio, do catch the rest of that CNA correspondent episode on our website, CNA or Me Listen apps, as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, along with YouTube. Nearly 30 panda cubs have made their television debut in China. They only have one job, and that's to deliver Chinese New Year wishes to the nation. Now, the cubs were introduced in festively decorated display areas as their keepers called out season's greetings. The fur balls were briefly placed on marked starting lines. Not very obedient there, but it did symbolize a new beginning, but they were quickly distracted, wandering off. The cubs were also placed in a giant rice dumpling bowl where they were seen tumbling over one another. Rice dumplings are a traditional New Year treat, symbolizing family reunion and togetherness. Quite appropriate. Well, thanks for joining us in this Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget headlines anytime, CNA.Asia, Facebook, and also YouTube. Bye-bye.